They threw her into the K9 pen. She walked out with the dog calm, put her in, with Aries. Colonel Marcus Devon said it like a punchline, like the funniest thing he'd thought of all week. He said it loud enough so the 41 personnel standing in formation along the perimeter of the K9 tactical yard could hear every syllable. He wanted witnesses. He always wanted witnesses. You want to shadow the working dog unit, sweetheart? Fine, shadow them up close. The words cut through the morning air like a blade scraping across the inside of a helmet, thin and metallic and just a little too sharp to ignore. Sergeant First Class Avery Cole said nothing. She stood at the entrance to the K9 compound, a canvas tote over one shoulder, a standard-issue notebook under her arm, wearing a uniform so stripped of rank insignia it might as well have been a janitor's. No unit patch. No combat badge. No flash of color anywhere on her chest that told you where she'd been or what she'd done there. She was 31 years old and looked 10 years younger than the job she'd done. Medium height. Brown hair in a regulation bun, not a strand loose. Jaw set, not clenched. Eyes the color of weathered concrete, not cold. Exactly, just finished waiting for something. The K9 unit at Camp Raven, North Carolina, ran 23 working dogs and 42 handlers through a joint training rotation twice yearly. Malinois, German Shepherds, Dutch Shepherds. The most aggressive protocol in the program was Aries, a Belgian Malinois, 4 years old, 72 pounds of drive and controlled aggression, who had bitten 2 trainers in the past 18 months. Both had required medical evacuation. The handlers talked about Aries in the same hushed register people used when discussing IEDs, with the specific, focused respect of people who understood exactly what kind of damage waited inside. Devon had not put Cole in with Aries because he thought she could handle it. He'd put her in there because he thought she couldn't. There were 41 people watching. He'd counted on that too. Cole looked at the chain-link gate. She looked at Aries through the fence. The dog was pacing the far wall, muscled shoulders rolling like a mechanism under tension, ears pinned forward. Head dropping slightly, the posture every handler in the yard recognized as pre-engagement. Not passive, not curious. "Ready anything else, sir?" Cole said. 3 words. Flat as a tarmac. Devon grinned. "See if he likes you, Miss Consultant." She pulled the gate open and stepped inside. Sergeant Major Ray Kowalski was 62 years old and had spent 38 of those years inside the United States Army. He had served in 3 decades of operational theaters, had trained handlers in Germany and Korea, and twice in the sandbox. And he had seen the full spectrum of what human beings could do to dogs, and what dogs could do to human beings when the relationship broke the wrong way. He stood at the far edge of the compound, arms loose at his sides, coffee going cold in his right hand. He'd arrived early, as he always did. He'd seen Cole walk up from the main gate, and something about the way she'd walked, the pace, the angle, the stillness, had made him stop thinking about his coffee. It wasn't her stride exactly. It was what she didn't do. She didn't scan the compound the way visitors did. The wide, nervous sweep, the eyes bouncing from dog pen to dog pen, looking for the threat. She scanned it like she was cataloging it, quadrant by quadrant. Slow and methodical. The way a person does when they've already decided how to move through a space before they enter it. Kowalski's jaw tightened. He said nothing. He watched. Aries crossed the distance in under a second. Not slowly. There was no slow version of Aries. One moment he was against the far wall, the next he was 8 feet out and closing, 80 pounds of Belgian Malinois compressed into forward momentum, and the sound he made was not a bark. It was lower than that. It was the sound that handlers described afterward as the one that emptied your stomach before your brain caught up with what was happening. Cole did not run. She did not raise her arms. She did not go wide-eyed or rigid or any of the things that activated Eris's drive. She went quiet. Not calm in a pretend way. In the way a machine goes quiet when it switches modes. She lowered herself smoothly, not dropping, lowering, controlled, until she was in a crouch. Weight forward on the balls of her feet, shoulders loose. Hands visible at her sides, palms angled slightly outward. Her eyes tracked him without fixing on him. Not direct eye contact. Peripheral, the way that reads to a working dog, not as submission and not as threat, but as something else entirely, something they recognize. Ares hit a point 6 feet out and suddenly wasn't moving. He didn't slow down gradually. He just stopped, the way a switch cuts. His ears rotated forward. His head canted fractionally to one side. The 41 people along the fence line didn't breathe. Devon stopped grinning. Cole breathed. 4 counts in, slow and even. Hold 4. 4 counts out. Hold 4. The kind of breathing that tells a nervous system, and everything nearby that can read nervous systems, that there is no threat, and there is no fear, and there is nothing here worth reacting to. Ares's weight shifted back from his front feet. His tail was not wagging. But it wasn't rigid either. He was reading her. She let him read. Kowalski put his coffee down on the equipment rail without looking at it. 30 seconds passed. Maybe more. Ares took 1 step toward her. Then another. Then he was close enough that she could have touched him. And she let him move the last distance himself, let him push his nose into her open palm, and when he did, she moved her thumb slowly along the ridge of his ear, the way handlers learned in the 2nd week of training, the kind of touch that tells a working dog, in the most direct neurological terms, I know you. You know me. This is already done. Ares sat down. 41 people exhaled. How? Said a handler 20 feet to Kowalski's left, quietly, not really asking anyone. Kowalski was already writing something in the small leather notebook he kept in his breast pocket. He wrote 2 words, then stopped and looked back at Cole, who was now sitting fully cross-legged in the dirt of the K9 pen, while a dog that had hospitalized 2 trained handlers rested his chin on her knee. On the other side of the fence, Colonel Devon's face had done something complicated. He was still standing where he'd been standing when he issued the order. He was not grinning anymore. The afternoon brought new indignities. Devon had not gotten where he was by letting moments land wrong without a correction. By 1400, he'd reached out to base personnel through 2 intermediaries. Not directly, never directly, to request a credentials verification on one Avery Cole, listed on the day's access roster as a civilian contract behavioral specialist. The request was quiet. Devon called it routine. In the mess hall that evening, the story of the K9 pen had already acquired narrative embellishment. In the first version it spread, Cole had simply not gotten bitten. In the second, Ares had sat. By the 3rd cycle through the building, Ares had rolled over. Devon's aide forwarded his superior a message that called the whole thing probably a fluke and worth keeping an eye on. Cole sat alone at a corner table with a tray that held rice, protein, and black coffee. She ate with the steady mechanical efficiency of someone who had long stopped expecting meals to be pleasant. She listened. She filed names to faces. She tracked who deferred to whom in the lunch line, where the actual authority flowed beneath the visible rank, who the junior enlisted watched when Devon walked in, and who they watched when Devon left. These were different people. Knowing the difference mattered. She inputted the monthly network authentication code at 1617 from a borrowed terminal in the administrative annex. The ENCO beside her had watched with professional curiosity. He'd been inputting that code for 9 months, and it took him 4 minutes and 2 error corrections. She entered it in under 11 seconds. No errors, no hesitation, not performing speed, just done. He didn't say anything. She was already logging out. By the following morning, the credentials request had gone up 2 levels and come back down with a notation Devon's aide described as unusual. The verification office had found a file on Avery Cole. The problem was the file was partially sealed. Not empty, the initial entries were visible, a standard service record, nothing remarkable. But beginning at a date 7 years ago. The file flagged restricted access and required a clearance level nobody at Camp Raven currently held. This was the part Devon found infuriating. Not that the file was sealed. Sealed files existed for good reasons. Operational security, long-term cover, interagency agreements he didn't have the context for. What infuriated him was that he'd asked a direct question, and the answer had come back incomplete. And he did not like incomplete. He found her at 0900 in the K9 training yard again. She was running Ares on a protection pattern sequence that took most handlers 8 weeks to build with a dog from scratch. She'd been on base for 30 hours. Miss Cole. He stopped 10 feet from her. 2 of his staff trailed behind, positioned where they were useful. I need a moment. She brought Ares to heel. Her sleeve rolled slightly at the motion. Above her left wrist, visible for just a second before the fabric settled back, was a tattoo. Small, precise, 3 interlocking elements in a design that was simultaneously ornate and stripped down, a style that had nothing to do with civilian inkwork. Kowalski saw it from his position near the perimeter fence. His pen stopped moving. The design wasn't large. It wasn't decorative. It was the kind of mark given at the end of something, not the beginning. And only to the people who had survived what most didn't. Kowalski had seen that precise insignia before, twice. Both times on people whose official records he was never supposed to have seen. Both times on people whose official records said they were doing something completely unremarkable in a place very far away, while the actual record, the classified one, the real one, said something else entirely. His hand flattened against the equipment rail. No, he thought. And then, yes. Your credentials clearance came back incomplete, Devon said. He kept his voice official. Professional, he was performing, still, but the audience had shifted. This was not the same performance he'd given at the K9 Pengate yesterday. Something in the register had changed, even if he didn't know why yet. I need to ask you directly. What is your current assignment classification? Behavioral Integration Specialist, Cole said. Contract, that's your listed title. That's not your classification. I'm not authorized to discuss my classification with you, sir. His jaw tightened. You're on my base. I'm aware. That makes you subject to my command authority. She looked at him for a moment. It was a very calm look. The kind of look that contains information. I understand you believe that, sir. The nearest staff officer shifted his weight. Small motion. He'd heard something in her phrasing that he wasn't sure how to account for. I'm initiating a formal security inquiry, Devon said. You'll report to the JAG office at 1300 for a debrief. She controlled her breathing. 4 in. Hold 4. 4 out. Hold 4. Understood. Until the inquiry is resolved, your base access is suspended. She nodded once. Is there something you'd like to say? Devon asked. He wanted her to react. He'd been waiting for her to react since the moment he'd sent her into the K9 pen. He wanted the crack, the protest, The moment she showed him who was really in charge of this situation. "No, sir," Cole said. She handed Eris's lead to the handler behind her and walked toward the administrative building without looking back. Kowalski watched her go. His notebook was open in his hand. He hadn't written anything new in it for the last 4 minutes. He was thinking about a briefing he'd attended 11 years ago, classified. Run by an agency with a 3-letter name, in which he'd seen a photograph, blurry, tactical, shot from a rooftop somewhere in the Levant, and a service jacket that contained a call sign only 7 people in the room had been cleared to know. Wren. He looked down at his notebook. He picked up his pen. He was not the kind of man who acted on incomplete information, but he was also not the kind of man who ignored what his 38 years of experience was telling him at significant volume. He closed the notebook. He walked toward the administrative building. The JAG holding room was 8 by 10 feet. Concrete walls, metal bench, a door with a single horizontal slit of reinforced glass. A window near the ceiling showed a rectangle of blue sky, cloud cover moving through, the specific white and gray of late-morning marine layer. The room smelled of cleaning solvent, and something underneath it that disinfectant never fully eliminated. Cole sat on the bench with her back against the wall and her canvas tote between her feet and her watch on her wrist. This is the near-fail moment. The part where, from the outside, it looks finished. Credentials suspended. Subject detained. Inquiry initiated. The paperwork accumulating in the proper channels. The proper channels moving at their proper pace. The vast bureaucratic weight of a military installation tilting against one person sitting alone in a room the size of a walk-in closet. Except she'd planned for this room. Not this specific room, but this room. She looked at her watch. The display read 13:18. In 17 minutes, the check-in she had not made to the protocol relay at Fort Meade would register as a missed contact. The protocol for a missed contact by an asset operating under classified red cover was automatic, not discretionary, not subject to someone's judgment call. Automatic. A flag would hit a watch officer's screen at 13:35, and the watch officer's job, the only job she had, was to escalate it. In 49 minutes, a secondary protocol she'd activated 3 months ago. Before she'd ever set foot on Camp Raven, before she'd filed the behavioral specialist contract, before she'd looked up Marcus Devon's service record and seen what wasn't there, would route a notification package to the Office of Special Investigations. The package contained names. It contained dates. It contained transaction records that had taken 14 months to assemble and which described, in specific financial detail, the relationship between one Colonel Marcus Devon and a defense contractor whose principal client was not the United States government. In approximately 2 hours, Colonel Devon was going to learn the difference between the authority you're handed and the authority you've earned. Nobody had taken her watch. She'd planned that, too. She breathed. 4 in, hold 4, 4 out, hold 4. The sky in the ceiling window was moving. Clouds, late morning light going towards noon. She was already thinking about the next phase. The first crack came from Kowalski. He did not go to the JAG office. He went 2 levels above it, to the office of the installation's deputy commander, Colonel Arlene Fitch, and he asked for 3 minutes of her time on an informal basis. He'd known Fitch for 11 years. He'd trained her handler units twice. She gave him the 3 minutes. What he said in those 3 minutes, no one was cleared to know. What Fitch did immediately afterward, picking up a secure line and placing a call that bypassed the installation's standard communications routing, suggested that whatever Kowalski had said had been enough. By 13:40, the missed check-in flag had already landed. By 1355, the Office of Special Investigations notification package had been received and opened by 3 people whose job description included the phrase counterintelligence oversight. By 1402, 2 phone calls had been made, and 1 had been made back. By 1415, Camp Raven's main gate logged the arrival of 2 unmarked black SUVs carrying 5 people in civilian clothing, 2 of whom were carrying credentials that the duty officer described afterward as the kind of credentials that make you feel like you've been doing something wrong, even if you haven't. Devon heard about the vehicles at 1418. He was in his office reviewing the JAG inquiry documentation when his aide came in with the look on his face that staff get when they have information that no one wants to carry. "Sir, there are individuals at the gate. They're asking for you." "What kind of individuals?" His aide described the credentials. Devon's pen stopped moving. They brought her out of the holding room at 1427. She walked into the administrative courtyard where a cluster of people had assembled with a specific purposeful density that suggested this was not a coincidence of schedules. Devon was there. His 2 staff officers were there. Fitch was there. To the left, expression neutral but eyes tracking everything. Kowalski stood at the edge of the group. Not in the group. At the edge of it. Watching the way he'd been watching since the first morning. And there were 4 people from the vehicles. 2 men, 2 women, civilian dress. The kind of controlled stillness that comes from occupying a lot of rooms like this one and knowing exactly how they end. The woman in front, late 40s, dark suit. The kind of appearance that said this is official business at the highest level, looked at Cole for a moment. "We need to confirm identity," she said, to no one specific. Cole set her canvas tote on the table beside her. She reached to her left sleeve and pulled it back to the forearm. The tattoo was there, small. Precise. The 3 interlocking elements in that specific design that the woman in the dark suit had clearly been briefed on, because when she saw it, her face did something that wasn't emotion and wasn't the absence of emotion. It was recognition. Pure and unambiguous. The woman's hand rose. The salute was formal. Complete. The hand at the correct angle, the wrist clean, held for the full count. The room detonated. Gasps, actual audible gasps, from multiple personnel along the courtyard. One of Devon's staff officers dropped his tablet. The clatter hit the concrete and rang out like a gunshot in the suspended moment that followed, and then the AC unit cycling on suddenly seemed deafeningly loud. And someone somewhere scraped a chair back without meaning to. And all of these small sounds filled up the total silence that had taken over every person who understood what they were witnessing. The second salute came from one of the men in civilian dress. Then the third. Then the fourth. Colonel Fitch raised her hand. Devon stood absolutely still. The woman in the dark suit spoke. Her voice was clear and even and pitched to carry. "For the record, Sergeant First Class Avery Cole. Designated call sign Wren. Navy SEAL Command Advisory and Counterintelligence Liaison, currently operating under classified red cover. Holdover classification above the clearance of all installation personnel present." She paused for exactly 1 beat. "Every person in this courtyard, including myself, operates within authority she has been granted to oversee." Silence. The kind of silence that makes people check exits. Look at each other. Look away. Kowalski raised his hand. His salute was not fast. He was 62 years old, and he had been in this job for 38 years, and he had given a great many salutes in that time. Some of them mandatory, and some of them chosen. This one was chosen. His hand came up slowly, and the angle was perfect, and he held it there longer than protocol required, because protocol wasn't the point. Cole looked at him. Her expression did not change. But something in her eyes did. A recognition. The kind that doesn't require words, because the words would only make it smaller. She returned his salute. Then she turned to Devon. He was looking at her with the face of a man who has just understood something he cannot ununderstand. Not theatrical fear. Not performed shock. Something quieter and worse than that. The awareness of a person who has been moving confidently through a room they didn't know they were trapped in. His face cycled through surprise and denial, and then, at the bottom of both of those things, something that looked like genuine cold recognition. Colonel Devon, the woman in the dark suit, said, "You are formally under investigation for violations of Section 18 United States Code 794, 18 USC 1030, and conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline. You will surrender your credentials and your sidearm at this time." He didn't move for a moment. Then he did. Slowly. Both hands. No drama. The sidearm on the table. The credentials beside it. His hands flattened on the surface afterward, as if he needed the contact. Two of the civilian personnel moved to his flanks without touching him yet. Cole picked up her canvas tote. She breathed. 4 in. Hold 4. 4 out. Hold 4. She was already somewhere else in her mind, already in the next file, the next name on the list, the next installation where the rot had been growing in the dark for long enough that someone had decided to send her. She walked out of the courtyard. Aries was at the K9 unit gate when she passed. He pressed his nose to the chain link. She stopped. She put 2 fingers through the fence and touched the ridge of his ear, the way she had from the beginning. He sat down. She walked on. The North Carolina evening came in blues and grays, the sky going amber at the tree line, the air smelling of pine and diesel, and the specific dry heat of late summer fading at the edges. Cole sat on a concrete barrier at the northeast corner of the installation, her tote beside her, her notebook open and untouched in her lap. Her watch read 1953. She was looking at the sky. They had thrown her into the K9 pen. They had forgotten that some people are thrown into hard things and come out having made the hard thing quiet. Justice isn't loud. It's patient. It waits in the spaces the arrogant don't think to guard, the small rooms, the isolated targets. The women stripped of insignia, standing at chain-link gates with nothing visible that says what they are. It waits there. And eventually, it answers. Her phone was on the barrier beside her. There was a message on it. Not from the installation, not from the OC, not from any of the agencies whose names had been in today's room. From a number she recognized. The message contained 3 things: a name, a city, and a photograph. The photograph was surveillance imagery, high resolution. Rooftop, somewhere in Eastern Europe, she could read the architecture in the background. A figure at the corner of the frame, partially obscured, wearing civilian clothes. The figure had one distinctive feature visible even at this angle and distance. The right hand, the way it hung at the side, the subtle curl of the fingers around a phantom grip that came from years of handling a weapon that was no longer there. She recognized the posture. She did not recognize the face. The angle didn't give her a face. But the posture. She had seen that posture before, at a time and a place that was in the sealed portion of her own file. The message added 1 line below the photograph. He was supposed to be dead. Cole looked at the sky for another moment. The amber at the tree line was deepening toward orange. Beautiful in the specific way that things are beautiful when you notice them between one thing ending and the next thing beginning. She closed her notebook. She picked up her phone. She had names to find. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to MVP Stories for more.